Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Presley, and I'm one of the Congregational Life Consultants for the Mid-America region. And I'm delighted this evening to be the technical host as opposed to the subject matter expert for this webinar, Life Inside the Golden Circle, Lessons from Sinek. And this is being put on by the Mid-America region in collaboration with and with the genius of the Association of Membership Professionals. I just want to remind you that we are recording. Some people who, if you don't want your picture to appear, you can always stop your video. And again, on the bottom of your screen, if you move your mouse around, there's a little camera with stop video, and you can do that. We urge everyone to mute yourself when you're not talking. And what Mark is going to be doing is he will be presenting the material and then asking for questions and conversation after. You can feel free to type any of your questions into the chat, or at that point we can unmute people and you can share. But I want to start with some opening words before I hand this over to Mark for him to introduce himself. This is a reading by Ivan Sian, that is from the book Voices from the Margin, which are meditations by persons of color in our movement. Yvonne was the first female African-American minister of our association, at least in the Common Era, and she was ordained in 1981 by All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. And she wrote, "All are one. Each of us comes from a different place, yet all we are one. We carve for ourselves our own unique space, yet all we are one. We learn how to speak, eat, dress, cook, and play in different ways. Of common homeland we have not a trace, yet all we are one. We kill, maim, and harm one another with no thought for God's will. We forget the one God and one grace, yet all we are one. On a mountain in East Africa near Olduvai Gorge, our common mother Eve says that we come from one human race, and all we are one." And so, Mark, I'll hand it over to you now to educate us this evening.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for those lovely words. And thank you for your valuable assistance, both in the publicity and the registration, and for your help this evening. We're indebted to the Mid-America region. So my name is Mark Bernstein. And let me say right at the outset, if you want an edited copy of this PowerPoint presentation with notes pages, please email me at the address that's on the screen, and I'll be happy to send it to you via WeTransfer. As Lisa said, this presentation will be recorded as well and will be available both on the Mid-America website as well as the UU Association of Membership Professionals website. But if you don't want to wait, I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint presentation. My number is also up there if you want to chat about anything, or if you want to berate me for wasting the next hour and a half of your life. So let me tell you that I proudly worked for the Central East region of the UUA for 7 years. I left about 3.5 years ago, and I continue today as adjunct staff for the Central East region. I'm also a member of the board of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Membership Professionals, and I am a 25+ year member of the UU Church of Delaware County in Media, Pennsylvania, which is just outside Philadelphia. When I am not doing UU work, I am providing consultation and training to agencies that work with people with disabilities, as I have been doing throughout my career in this field, off and on for the past 40 years. So I am delighted that you were able to join us tonight. So let me begin by talking to you about Simon Sinek. He is a leadership guru, a professor at Columbia University, a marketing specialist, and founder of Sinek Partners, which teaches leaders and organizations how to inspire people. He was born in Wimbledon, England, and grew up in Johannesburg, London, and Hong Kong. Later, he moved to the United States and graduated from Northern Valley Regional High School in, of all places, Demorest, New Jersey, which is about 10 miles from Midtown Manhattan. Sinek is also active with the charity which is called Water, an organization devoted to helping bring clean water to the over 700 million people around the world who don't yet have it. Sounds like a Unitarian Universalist. Sinek has written several books. One of them is the book that this presentation is based on. So these are some of the quotes and some of the ideas of Simon Sinek, and I've adapted them for our congregational life. So he wrote Start With Why. The other book of note that I wanted to point out is a wonderful book called Leaders Eat Last. So here's what I will talk to you about tonight. And after my presentation, I look forward to a spirited conversation about this very important topic. We'll start by talking about leadership in our congregations, and that's really the overriding theme that that we'll be talking about throughout the evening. And then the other major theme that we'll be talking about is mission. We'll talk about reasons for starting with why and reasons for staying with why in your congregation. And then we'll end with some of my thoughts on how we get everyone in the congregation to start with why. So that's kind of an outline of what I have in store for you. So let me begin by asking you this question. Are you a leader in your congregation? So I wanted to start by talking about leadership because I use the term liberally in this presentation. So raise your hand if you don't think you're a leader in your congregation. Okay, you can put your hands, Lisa, put your hands down. You're a leader. No, I'm just kidding. But I see you hiding behind that desk. So get out here. Like it or not, you are a leader. You would not be on this call if you weren't. So I consider all of you with me tonight to be leaders in your congregation. And here is a definition, in case you're still in doubt, of leadership from Simon Sinek that we can all live with, and that is totally inclusive. And I love this definition. Leadership is not a rank or position. It is a choice to look after the person to the left of us and the person to the right of us. There isn't anyone that would exclude themselves from leadership under that definition. And Sinek also wrote this in the prelude to his book, Start With Why. There are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or influence. Those who lead inspire us. Whether individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead us not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. So, why this webinar? This webinar is designed for you as leaders in the congregation to reflect on and hopefully discuss whether you lead by virtue of your power or influence, or whether you lead because you inspire others. And if it is the former, how you can become the leader that others want to follow. There are many things that are troubling in our congregations, but if we are to rise above it all, it has to start with our commitment to lead and for others to follow, not for us, but for them. I hope that you will come away from our time together with renewed insight and hopefully renewed energy to continue doing the critically important work of realizing the beloved community. So let's begin. This is the planet Pluto. Yes, it is a planet again. It had been banished to the outer realms of the solar system where it already was and not classified as a planet, but now it is a planet again. And you may not be aware of this because you've probably been so caught up with all of the Trump travails of late, but they discovered life on Pluto. And I actually have an actual photograph of a Plutite, which I think is what it's called. There he is in his spacesuit. And there he is outside of his spacesuit. So when life was discovered on Pluto, our UUA president, Susan Fredericks Gray, flew to the planet Pluto and preached on Unitarian Universalism. And as a result, many Plutites converted to Unitarian Universalism. And they decided to, this is all true, by the way, and they decided to send a representative to Earth to learn more about our faith. So here they come. They're at the door of your congregation. You invite them in, and they begin to ask you about your congregation. And here, I think, is how the congregation will go. Plutite. So tell me about your congregation. You. Well, we have wonderful Sunday worship services, and we teach RE classes to our children, and we have small group ministry and social events, and we go out into the community and we do social justice work and so on. Next question from the Plutite. So how do you do all this? You. Well, we have a board of trustees that kind of oversees everything, and our minister or our committee on ministry, if we don't have a minister, makes the decisions about worship. And we have volunteers or a DRE who run the RE program and so on. Plutite. Okay, so I understand what you do and how you do it, but why do you do it? You. Huh? What do you mean? Well, I mean, what is your purpose? What do you believe? Why do you exist? Why do you get out of the bed in the morning to go to your congregation? And why should anyone care? And this is where you turn into Ralph Cramden and say, humana, 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 because many of us don't know how to answer. Now, if you don't know who Ralph Cramden is, I feel sorry for you because you missed out on the honeymooners. So this is the golden circle of Simon Sinek. Most organizations start with what? And that was the first question that the Plutite asked your congregation. And that's usually how our conversations start. Then they talk about how, so what they do, how they do it, and then eventually, maybe, they get to why. But excellent organizations, says Sinek, start with why. And I'll elaborate on this some more, this whole interplay between the what, the how, and the why. So what we're talking about here, folks, is your mission. Not that mission. I'm talking about your reason for being. That which, as Reverend David Bumbaugh wrote, speaks to the congregation's calling, the source of its integrity, and its central reason for being. Our mission, he said, articulates what we are called to be and called to do. It answers the question, why must this congregation exist, instead of why does this congregation exist? And I absolutely love that distinction. It really kind of changes the conversation, doesn't it? So how's your mission? Do you have one? Do you have a mission statement? Can you recall it right now? Raise your hand if you can recite your mission statement verbatim right here, right now. Some congregations can. I think most can't. When someone asks you about your congregation, do you start with your mission, your reason for being? So I want to talk a bit about mission statements. But before I do, here are some wise words from the author Dan Pelota. He wrote, "A person or an organization on a mission is inspiring. A mission statement is an abstraction. The statement is not the source of the mission. The commitment is the source of the mission. The statement is merely the byproduct of the commitment." So I'm going to start off by talking about mission statements, but a mission is much more than that. The mission is what is underneath, or what is behind the statement, the commitment of the congregation, the reason for being. And I just want to ask for people that are just coming on, if you could mute yourself, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you go to the upper right corner of your screen, you'll see the microphone that you can mute. Thanks a lot. So mission statements, Tom Beloit said, should be memorable. The goal should be that if someone visits your church once, he or she should be able to say what it is when asked on the way out to the parking lot. Now, maybe that's a tad ambitious, but I think you get the idea. So here are some mission statements from for-profit companies. And mission statements start with why. And that's the reason I wanted to start off by talking about statements. Now, you may not agree with the products that these companies sell. I'm not endorsing any of them. I just want to give you an idea of mission statements that start with why. Amazon, to be Earth's most customer-centric company. That's ambitious. To build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they might want to buy online. That's their reason for being. Coca-Cola, to refresh the world in mind, body, and spirit, to inspire moments of optimism and happiness through our brands and actions. Now, you may not feel extremely happy drinking a bottle of Coke, but again, you get the idea. These are the brands. These are the reason why they do what they do. Let's leave the money thing out of it for now. Nike, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And they have an asterisk. And by athlete, they mean anyone who moves. So they try to be extremely inclusive. The company Life is Good, which makes hats and t-shirts with little stick figures and little cute sayings. Their mission statement, their why statement is to spread the power of optimism. And the airline company JetBlue, to inspire humanity both in the air and on the ground. Now again, no matter how you may feel about their products, this to them is their reason for being. This is their start with why statement. They don't talk about what they do or how they do it. They talk first about why they do what they do. Here are some mission statements in some of our congregations that I believe meet the criteria of starting with why. They are succinct, they are memorable, and they are powerful. And if you have one of those, I apologize for not including yours. The First Unitarian Church of Rochester, New York, creating connection by listening to our deepest selves, opening to life's gifts, and serving needs greater than our own every day. And they boil that down to 3 words: listen, open, and serve. The UU congregation in Andover, our mission is to seek the light of truth, share the warmth of love, and live the energy of action. The UU congregation of Lakeland, Florida, uniting in diversity, advocating for justice and love. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The First UU Fellowship of Huntington County in New Jersey, nurturing spiritual journeys, expanding social justice. And I couldn't resist putting in the mission statement from my congregation: ignite personal growth, engage in loving community, and serve with integrity. Now, underneath, or literally underneath, these mission statements are statements of philosophy or statements of principle that expand on the concepts that are outlined briefly in the mission statement. The mission statement is really a brand, but what's behind it is the reason that the congregation exists. But a mission and a mission statement is only the beginning. The mission needs to be embraced. It needs to be lived every day. And every program, every policy, every activity that the congregation engages in should relate back to the mission, your reason for being. So why is it important then to start with why? I think there are a number of reasons. For one thing, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it gives you a brand, a marketing tool to better attract people to your congregation. It also gives you a niche. When you start with what, you are doing what everyone else is doing. So when you start from the outside in, you are more conventional. But when you start with why, you announce your uniqueness, the qualities and intentions that define you as a congregation and that separate you from the rest. So when you begin from the inside out, you become remarkable. Starting with why also allows for a consistent message and a common language among members of the congregation. And it aids in the recruitment of volunteers and leaders who want to step up because they believe in the mission. And those leaders that do step up are better assured of having the qualities and the values necessary to lead effectively, because they are not stepping up because no one else is doing so, or because they feel it's their turn. They're doing it because they truly believe in the mission and they want to see it carried out. Starting with why not only benefits the congregation within its walls, but it also enhances the reputation and the visibility of the congregation in the surrounding community. Your congregation becomes known as a place of purpose and of meaning. So, why start with why? It serves as an effective marketing tool for attracting visitors to our doors. It gives us a unique identity and allows us to pursue those things that make us unique. It contributes to a consistent message and a common language among members. It aids in the recruitment of leaders and other volunteers who step up for the right reasons. And it enhances the reputation and the visibility of the congregation in the community. I think these are compelling reasons to begin looking more seriously at our mission and to begin starting with why when we talk about our congregation. So, why is it important then to stay with why? We talked about starting with why. Why is it important to stay with why? One reason is that it will enable congregations to get over the rough spots and to stay on course. And it will help congregations adapt to a constantly changing world. When there is conflict in our congregations, and there will always be conflict, or when there are changes in the congregation, maybe the minister leaving or staff leaving, or issues around governance or disparate ideas about which path the congregation should take. Your mission is there to center the congregation, to remind you why you exist, and to point you in the right direction. Mission is not a panacea, but it is critical as a center point for the congregation to assemble around. So when there are rough spots or changes in the life of the congregation, instead of asking, what should we do to maintain or adapt, we should ask, Why did we start doing what we're doing in the first place? And how can we continue doing it? You go back to why. You go back to your mission. So let's talk about the brain. Your brain is like a golden circle, kinda. And starting with why can also aid congregations in decision making. And here's how. Part of our brain, the neocortex, is responsible for rational thought and language. It corresponds to the what in the golden circle. So when we start with what, we are looking at our congregation rationally, and we are giving people rational, logical information. But information alone doesn't necessarily drive behavior. The limbic brain, where the feelings and emotions reside, things like trust and loyalty and compassion, corresponds to the why. When we start from the inside out, when we start with why, when we speak to the limbic brain, we are appealing to one's emotions, feelings, and in turn, we are driving decision making. Because one doesn't make decisions in the neocortex. They're made in the limbic brain. We go with our gut, and then we rationalize those decisions in the neocortex. So here's how I think this applies to congregational life. When visitors and friends of our congregation are contemplating becoming members, we want them to make the decision not just on the information that we give them, which appeals to the neocortex, but because in their gut, this feels like the right place to be, which engages their limbic brain. Similarly, when we invite current members of the congregation into volunteer and leadership positions, we want them to make that decision not just on the information we give them, but because in their gut, it feels like the right thing to do. We need to appeal to people, not just to their rational mind, but to their heart. And we do that by starting with why. So our mission needs to be front and center in our congregations. It needs to be clearly visible on our website. And when I go on, before I go to work with a congregation, I check out their website thoroughly. And one of the first things I'm looking for is their mission. And if I have to hunt for it, that's a red flag for me. It should be on day one of your UU 101 course or whatever you call it for prospective members. It should be at the beginning of your congregational meetings. It should be included in your visitors packet if you have one, on your order of service, in your agency newsletter, everywhere that you can think of. Missions will die if we don't keep them alive. So taking into account the ways in which the why, how, and what interact, for you as leaders in the congregation, here, I think, are your responsibilities. And there are three, again, relating to the why, the how, and the what. Leaders need to know why they do what they do, and they need to articulate it every day. They need to stay true to how they do what they do. And they need to be consistent and authentic in what they do relative to why they do it. It's the why, it's the how, and it's the what, and they all relate back to the why. Following these three guiding principles will, I believe, result in leaders that are effective and inspiring and will serve as role models for how others in the congregation conduct themselves. And isn't that the goal of every leader? Or to look at it similarly, but in a slightly different way, the why represents your beliefs, the how represents your actions, and the what are the results of those actions. And that is how the golden circle stays in balance. When all three are achieved and are in harmony, trust is built, value is perceived, leaders lead, the congregation happily follows, there is harmony and peace, and it's summer all the time, and free ice cream for everyone, and I realize that I'm going too far, but you get the idea. Why can't it be like this in our congregations? So here's the last piece that I want to discuss with you, and then hope that you have plenty of comments and questions and things to talk about. How do we get everyone in the congregation to start with why? How do we achieve and maintain this balance of the why and the how and the what? How do we get everyone on the same page? I think there are 4 ways. Here's number 1. Dust off that mission statement and revise it if it doesn't speak to who you are as a congregation. The rule of thumb is that mission statements should be reviewed every 3 years or so to make sure that they are still relevant and that they speak to the needs, the values, and the goals of your congregation. I have had the great good fortune as adjunct staff to work with a number of congregations on mission and vision and covenant and strategic planning. And the process that a congregation goes through in rewriting these things, particularly mission, brings the congregation together. And the process can be as valuable, if not more so, as the outcome. Number 2, enroll new members in the why right from the start. Sinek says, a company is a culture, a group of people brought together around a common set of values and beliefs. It's not products or services that bind a company together or a congregation. It's not size and might that make a company strong, and our smaller congregations know that. It's the culture, the strong sense of beliefs and values that everyone in the congregation shares. And enrolling new members in that culture right away strengthens, sorry, typo, that bond and makes the congregation stronger. Thirdly, rally the congregation around the idea of starting with why. We're talking systems change. We're talking culture change. And you all know how difficult it is to move the congregation whenever there's a change or hope for a change. So some of you may be familiar with this, but I really love this model. This is called the law of diffusion of innovation. And I've seen this in many different management models. And they pretty much have the same percentages. It's a bell curve. The idea behind it is this. Whenever an organization wants to move the congregation in a direction, it begins with the innovators. And in general, in any organization, including a congregation, about 2.5% of the members are the innovators. They're the ones that come up with the idea. Hopefully you are among those. They're the ones that want to push this idea out into the congregation. The second category are the early adopters, about 13.5%. These percentages are remarkably similar as you look at the different models. The early adopters are the people in your congregation that may not be in leadership positions formally, but they're ready to support change in the organization. And you know who they are. They're the people that you're going to go to first. Say, hey, we have a great idea here and we want your support. And then you have the 2 groups that make up the majority of the congregation, the early majority and the late majority. They make up about 2/3 of the people in the organization. They're sitting on the fence. They kind of want status quo because they don't like change. But particularly those in the early majority, if they see others starting to change, if it looks like it could work, then they're going to come on board. The late majority might come along later, but now they're starting to see a large percentage of people in the congregation starting to come on board, and so they will as well. And then all the way on the right-hand side, you have the laggards. And that percentage I've seen in models varies anywhere from 10 to 16%. The laggards are the ones in your congregation who resist change. They even may actively work against the change. You know who they are. In many of our congregations, we allow the laggards to take precedence. We don't change, we don't move forward because they also tend to be the most vocal. But healthy congregations and congregations that are committed to their mission understand that not everyone is going to agree with the change. And so what leaders need to do is to try to convince the laggards that this is a good idea. And if despite all of those efforts, they continue to resist the change, then you need to tell them that they will be sorely missed as the congregation moves forward. But the tipping point, that arrow that's sticking out there, is really interesting because in general, that's anywhere from 17 to 20% of the congregation, of the organization. And according to the literature, you need to get to that point. And once you do, the chances of affecting the change are much greater. 17 to 20% doesn't seem like a lot of people, but it requires that certainly all the early adopters and the innovators need to be on board. And then you need to get a few people from deeper within the congregation. So this is what we're up against, not just in starting with why, but any change that we want to affect in our congregations. And the fourth reason, or the fourth way to rally to get the congregation enrolled in the idea of starting with why, is to encourage members to create their personal mission statement. So I am going to schedule, I don't know how many folks are on by now, but I know probably a few. But I am going over the next week to schedule an interview with each and every one of you. And I'm going to make it in person. And I know many of you are out on the West Coast, but I am going to make it my mission to come to each of your congregations, and I'm going to have a brief interview with you. And I am simply going to ask you the question, what are you doing? You don't know when I'm going to be there, so I'm going to ask you to tell me what you're doing when I walk in the door and ask you the question. And probably here are some of the answers that you'll give me. I'm greeting everyone at the door. I'm preparing coffee for social hour. I'm facilitating a Soul Matters group. I'm getting ready to teach an OWL class. I'm listening to an inspiring sermon from my minister. And in that case, you're going to be really annoyed at me because I'm asking you this question during your minister's sermon. So let me tell you a story. A guy is walking down the street and he passes a construction site. And he sees three construction workers. And he goes up to them and he asks them that question, what are you doing? And the first construction worker says, I'm laying bricks. Goes up to the second construction worker and asks her, what are you doing? And she says, I'm making a living. Goes up to the third construction worker and asks him, what are you doing? And he says, I'm building a cathedral. It's the same construction site, but one person sees it as laying bricks, the second making a living, and the third is building a cathedral. So when I came to see you, and I've already done my interviews, they were very quick, you probably didn't even notice me there, and you gave me the answers you gave me, they're really essential, important things, but it's the what and the how. It's the laying bricks. It's the making a living of congregational life. But the why is building a cathedral. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you the question again. I'm going to ask you, what are you doing now?
So building a cathedral. So when I go back to ask you, what are you doing now in the context of a cathedral statement, the things that you might say to me, I'm becoming a better human being. I'm helping others to become a better human being. I'm modeling our principles every day, offering inspiration to the next generation of Unitarian Universalists, helping to spread the good news of our faith, helping people to experience a sense of belonging. So these are the cathedral statements. These are the roles that we play that help to sustain our mission, that make our congregational lives meaningful. This is why each and every one of us exists. And so if we create a personal mission statement, and if we remember that we're constantly building cathedrals, we're not focused on the what and the how, which are important, but we're focused on the why, which is why we're doing what we're doing in the first place. So here's the blueprint for how to get your congregation to buy into all this. Dust off your mission statement and revise it if it doesn't speak to who you are as a congregation. Enroll new members in the why right from the start. Rally the congregation around the idea of starting with why, and encourage members to create their personal mission statement and to share it. What a great exercise. What a great Soul Matters or small group ministry topic that would be. So now, while you can still hear me, here is my big closing thought. This is from Simon Sinek. Leaders don't have all the great ideas. They provide support for those who want to contribute. Leaders achieve very little by themselves. They inspire people to come together for the good of the group. And leaders never start with what needs to be done. Leaders start with why we need to do things.